reading because it's debatable if Darwin himself even really understood the full implications of his theory. This confusion has been fostered by evolution's friends and foes alike, and it is parallel to the confusion of the coin toss tournament winner who basks in the misconsidered glory of the idea that since the tournament had to have a winner, and since he is the winner, the tournament had to produce him as the winner. Evolution can be an algorithm, and evolution can have produced us by an algorithmic process without its being true that evolution is an algorithm for producing us. Well, today is Stewardship Sunday. What's that? Well, we're going to talk today about taking care of First Unitarian Society. Some of you know that I really like words and thinking about them. So, I know you're saying because he has so many, throws so many out. Yes, that's true too. But I also like examining them. So anytime I use a word, I like to know what it really means. The first way to do that is to look at its etymology, its history, where the word came from. So stewardship is a word that comes out of Old English. When you see the ending ship, S-H-I-P, on several English words, they all have the same kind of way of going. Citizenship, horsemanship, scholarship, workmanship, friendship, kinship, warship. A few. There are more. Ship means a skill at creating something. A skill at creating something. The ship in friendship means that you know how to create being a friend. The ship on scholarship means that you know how to go about creating a scholar in yourself. The ship on warship means that you know how to give worth to things. And the ship on stewardship means that you know how to steward. Okay, but where does steward come from? That's an Old English word too. Ward can be either a noun, a person, ward cleaver, or a thing. That can also be a verb, something that you do. So ward means to take care of. A ward wards off bad things and makes good things happen. Okay, so where does the stew come from? And that's a little bit more complicated, actually, because the Old English has changed over time. It's just that stew is really, really old English, so that it's changed, okay? Now, the parliament in Germany is housed in a building called the Reichstag, for short. Yes, it's about, actually, those Germans also have, it's actually this long, but we shorten it to Reich, yes. Because German words can get really long, so we in the English language world have made them shorter. So we have got it down to the old Germanic stig, S-T-I-G. And in Old English, that meant hall, okay? So, or a building, right? So a stig ward is someone who takes care of a building, right? And the ship means that you know how to take care of the building. So stewardship is someone who's skillful at taking care of a hall or being careful to being able to care for the hall. You with me so far? That's what it really means. That's why we call people who clean and maintain our building here stewards, as a matter of fact. And not only that, you English language fiends, but one of the people who takes care of our building is named Antelmo Pastor, which pastor in Spanish means shepherd. So he's taking care of us all. Nice to have a steward like that, right? And stewardship for the people in the congregation means, well, paying Antelmo fairly and also taking care of what we do as a congregation. For us, having a bright, shiny building is only actually a means to an end, and that's the end of what we do here in this nice, shiny building. As part of being good stewards, we need to think carefully and often about what it means to be here and what it is we are doing here, which is why at lunch today we'll have some board members and folks talking about our mission. That's why FUS exists in the world. So, you see, why I like the history of words. The history of words reveals a lot about what people actually are thinking about when they use them, even if we don't always know that we're thinking that. Now, I titled my talk today, Breaking Bread and Breaking Through. And what I want to think about today is why we gather here and what we're all about here. It's good to ask simple questions sometimes. Now, take a look at the quote in your order of service this morning. I'm going to go back to it several times. It's from Edward Gorey. Quote, "There are so many things you've been brought up to believe that it takes you an awful long time to realize that they aren't you." Which that first song you all sang was kind of talking about that, right? And now you know Edward Gorey's work. He's famous for those black and white pen and ink drawings that look really dark and foreboding. It's on the beginning of mystery on public broadcasting. Gorey lived in the 20th century, but his art looks like he lived in the century before that. And if you do happen to have your bio-external extended mind device this morning, otherwise known as a smartphone, you can look up Edward Gorey. But I'll read it for you again. "There are so many things we've been brought up to believe that it takes you an awful long time to realize that they aren't you." I think this quote has a lot to do with why First Unitarian Society is here. I think it is our meaning and our purpose. Gorey is pointing out that your beliefs are not you. That's a basic teaching in Buddhism, but we don't do all that well at talking about it in Western religious traditions. But it's basic in the understanding of humanism. Realizing the difference between socially imposed belief and what you yourself have discovered through free thought, thinking freely, well, that's a very difficult activity. Yes, looking out and seeing what color the sky is. Necessary, I would call it, however, necessary if you hope to move from mere reactivity in your life to living a considered existence. Socrates was wrong, I think, when he said that the unexamined life is not worth living, but I think it's true to say that the unexamined life is kind of boring. The examined life is much more fulfilling and fun to live. As Edward Gorey points out, we do well to consider the difference between socially imposed beliefs and what you yourself have discovered thinking for yourself. The same is true of socially applied labels. Again, as Edward Gorey phrased it, there's so many things, right? There's so many labels you've been brought up with. It's hard to remember those labels are not you. Labels others give you are not you. The same is true of that other overused word, faith. We need to examine what we put our faith in, and we need to remember that many of us have grown up being told by family, friends, and our society to put faith in things that do not deserve our faith. As a matter of fact, the whole reason for the existence of our religious education program for our children, our youth, and our adults is to step away from those socially imposed ways of thinking and try to look at things from a different angle. All of this takes time, it takes energy, it takes a lot of thinking and self-questioning, and it helps to have others to join you in that very difficult process. The difficulty involved in thinking through and clarifying values is one of the central reasons that First Unitarian Society exists. We believe in lifelong learning. And lifelong learning means a lifetime of working out those big questions in life. Because guess what? Your mind changes over time if you haven't noticed. It requires a lifetime to figure out what you actually believe. And it requires a lifetime of unlearning, as Edward Gorey put it. Let's take, for example, I want to think about values. The work of a Harvard professor by the name of Josiah Royce. Most people don't know Josiah Royce anymore. But in 1908, he published a book he titled The Philosophy of Loyalty. The Philosophy of Loyalty. In that book, Royce argues that actually our highest aspirations are quite knowable and quite practical when we examine them through the lens of actually how we live our lives. Not in Philosophy 101, but sitting down and say, what do I do in my week? We each must sit down, and yeah, that requires some spare time to sit down and say, what is it that I do with my spare time? Meaning that each of us ask ourselves, why do I do that? Why do I spend my time as I do? By tracing the shape of how we actually do our lives, he's considered a pragmatic philosopher for this reason, right? How we actually do our lives, we find out where our loyalties lie. Family, friends, justice, spirituality, safety, art, beauty, playing video games. Most likely, Royce argues, where you put your loyalty as objectively measured by looking at your time is where your higher purpose lies. This is a practical way for clarifying values. Josiah Royce. Also, it's a way to enhance community because everyone has loyalties. Find out what your loyalties are, and you find a way of discussing your higher calling, your purpose, your meaning, the ultimate ground of your existence, as Paul Tillich called it, with other people. In this way of seeing things, diametrical opposites actually may not mean they are irreconcilable differences. For example, I'll tell you one of my personal loyalties, and that is I want everybody to have the opportunity for self-fulfillment in life. Everybody, no matter how much money you're born with. It's not hard to figure out why I have that loyalty, because most of my loved ones in my life have struggled under an unbearable weight of necessity rather than being able to explore self-fulfillment. And I consider that unjust. I believe that everyone has the right to pursue happiness. I think it is a nation's duty to its citizens. I also believe that only the power of government can give poor people a chance at self-fulfillment. Now, I believe that partly because I see how government does exactly the opposite with its police forces and its economic oppression. In other words, I think that it's possible that the poor, who vastly outnumber the rich, by the way, might seize what I see as rightfully theirs, except for some military force. Now you see how what might at first appear to be a complex loyalty becomes simple when I think it through a little bit. You can label me a socialist, but what I really want is very simple. I want everybody to have a chance. Now, Josiah Royce invites me to think about someone with an opposing loyalty. Now, I could set up a straw man and say, well, they're all jerks, right? Ain't it obvious? They just like stomping us have-nots down. They get a kick out of it. But that's a straw man. You can see how that leads to no understanding, no conversation, no ambiguity, no nuance. So I ask myself, might a have be loyal to a system that I see as disastrously oppressive? Might they? How might they? Now, yes, I should talk to someone, but I'm going to do this in my own brain because I'm an introvert. Well, as in my own case, part of it might be personal biography for someone, mightn't it? I was born a have-not, someone might say, but through the wealth of opportunities afforded by the good old USA, in our system, I'm a have now, by golly, bootstraps. Now, I might not agree with that assessment of reality, but I begin to see why someone's loyalty might be different than my own in this case. What was the greatest obstacle to success that my imaginary enemy had? Perhaps government regulation and taxes, maybe. Maybe this person was a small business owner. Government interference all the time, says my interlocutor, stopped me from being a success. So suddenly I realize that the very thing that I think can fix the problem is exactly what my opposite thinks causes the problem: government interference. We have competing loyalties, but actually we have the same vision. We both want everybody to have a chance. You see how one can think that through. In other words, with a bit of digging, I realize that my opposite has the same values that I claim to have, the same loyalty, as Royce would call it. It's merely that we are articulating our loyalties in different ways. In which case, how can I avoid loving my enemies? Well, or at least liking them, or not hating them, maybe. Problem solved if, well, not really, but we can work on the empathy piece of why our opposites think differently than we do. Loyalties, values. But now let's think a bit about our place in the universe.
Three short poems. First two by Shel Silverstein. Put something in. Draw a crazy picture. Write a nutty poem. Sing a mumble-gumble song. Whistle through your comb. Do a loony-goony dance. Cross the kitchen floor. Put something silly in the world that ain't been there before. Listen to the mustn'ts. Listen to the mustn'ts, child. Listen to the don'ts. Listen to the shouldn'ts, the impossibles, the won'ts. Listen to the never-haves, then listen close to me. Anything can happen, child. Anything can be. From A Brave and Startling Truth by Maya Angelou. We, this people on this small and drifting planet, whose hands can strike with such abandon that in a twinkling, life is sapped from the living. Yet those same hands can touch with such healing, irresistible tenderness that the haughty neck is happy to bow, and the proud back is glad to bend. Out of such chaos, of such contradiction, we learn that we are neither devils nor divines.
Yeah, love those words from Maya Angelou. It was, let's see, Clinton. She read that at Clinton's inauguration, the first one. Yeah, first one. As you know, and Stella helped us with that today, we have 7 principles in Unitarian Universalism, and the 7th, which she read, goes like this: respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. Now, as you heard in the reading from Charles Darwin, the theory of natural selection implies that all living things are connected, netted together, as Darwin put it in 1837. Now, back to the history of words for just a minute. Okay, just hang on. When he said netted together in 1837, the word network did not yet exist, so he couldn't use it. Network was not a word that was used at the time, nor was the word web used as we use it today in our seventh principle. So he had to say it however he could say it at the time. He said it in different words, but he said the interdependent web of existence of which we all are a part. Darwin's theory of natural selection implies some things about reality. One is that everything is tied together. Another is that everything exists as it does by a combination of physical laws and chance. The reading from Daniel Dennett this morning underlines the point that nearly everyone misses about the theory of natural selection. It wasn't designed, and it didn't have to lead to us. It just did. If we unlearn what our society tells us to think, these realizations from Darwin can lead to, I think, a deep, deep truth and meaning, which I think is three essential points of humanism. You know, I'm always trying to simplify things so I can remember them, because I don't remember things well. Here, I think, are the three essential points of humanism. One, everything is connected. I don't think we can argue with that. Two, everything changes. That's straight out of Buddhism, but again, I don't think we can argue about it. Everything changes. And three, I think there's a therefore there. We must take care of each other. I'll repeat that. Everything's connected. Everything changes. We should take care of each other. But, okay, but seriously, how do we unlearn what is very aptly called social programming? The learnings that are by definition woven into the social fabric of the society in which we live. We get the message in school, we get it in the workplace, in the media, and in social interactions. Our dominant society insists that we're individuals, making individual decisions, doing individual things. Our dominant society insists that you can be safe from change if you just buy this and do that. Our dominant society insists that you can do what you want, when you want, with animals, the natural resources, and other people for that matter. Our dominant society insists that it's all about me, me, me. But if you want to save the planet and the living things on it, we have to think differently. We have to unlearn what our society tells us. Hey, build a wall. China has one, and look at its economy. Someone here can tell you what kind of fallacy that is. One way to do what I'm talking about is not to take things all that seriously. As Silverstein put it in the poem that Rev. Kelli read, put something silly in the world that ain't been done before, ain't been there before. Creativity helps break us out of the socially imposed walls that surround us. Shel Silverstein is saying what Edward Gorey was trying to say in that quote in your order of service. Listen to the mustn'ts, child. Listen to the don'ts. Listen to the shouldn'ts, the impossibles, the won'ts. Listen to the never haves. And listen close to me. Anything can happen, child. Anything can be. A materialist, naturalist viewpoint tells us that everything is everything. And there's nothing else than everything, and everything is netted together. That's why we can say that leads to a moral imperative. Therefore, we must take care of each other. In her poem, A Brave and Startling Truth, Maya Angelou sums up the whole point of humanism, I believe. We, this people on this small and drifting planet whose hands can strike with such abandon that in a twinkling life is sapped from the living, yet those same hands can touch with such healing, irresistible tenderness that the haughty neck is happy to bow and the proud back is glad to bend. Out of such chaos, of such contradiction, we learn that we are neither devils nor divines. That's the great mystery of human existence. Out of such chaos, of such contradiction, we learn that we are neither devils nor divines. No, we're only human, and that's not a bad thing to be if you're out to do some good in the world, if that's where you put your loyalty. That's the essence of humanism. It's a very radical thought. It's a radical truth that needs to exist in our world and on the religious landscape. First Unitarian Society is the keeper and the steward of that truth that so few places are willing to actually speak out loud. That's why FUS has been here. It's why we're here today, and it's why we will be here in the future.